What's up, everybody? You're listening to the First Take podcast. I'm Molly Karam. When was the last time you ordered clothes online and got to try them on before buying them? Never, right? Well, that's exactly what jackthreads.com does. You can try anything on at home for free, and you only pay for what you keep. So whether it's a big name brand or the Jack Threads in-house line, you can be sure you are 100% in love with the items you ordered before spending a cent. So choose anything you want, try it on at home for free. You'll have 7 days to decide if it's working for you. And then Jack Threads gives you everything you need to send things back, packing tape and prepaid shipping labels. So go to jackthreads.com, enter code FIRST when you submit your tryout for 20% off anything you keep. That's jackthreads.com, code FIRST to save 20% on anything you keep. Never buy before you try, ever again. Hey, coming up on the First Take podcast on a Friday, we'll break down the big games this weekend in the NFL, plus KD and Russell Westbrook were reunited, and not everybody was feeling so good. Lots to talk about from last night, outfits, trash talking, and, of course, the game. And Richard Sherman has a message for the NFL, but should they listen? Let's get it started. Come on in. Welcome into First Take on this Feel Good Friday, folks. Good morning, Max Kellerman. I'm fantastic. Stephen A. is in Vegas, and listen up, people. He's pulling a Max Kellerman here because he is going to be calling the Manny Pacquiao-Jesse Vargas fight tomorrow. Are you already nervous? Can you focus for today's show?
Well, first of all, I'm always focused on First Take. Let's be clear about that. But Max Kellerman, I must admit, I'm nervous as hell. I can't deny it. I'm cool now, but I'm nervous as hell about tomorrow night. I've never called boxing matches in my life. I'm scared to death. So I will be calling you this afternoon for advice, tips, and information. See, I know my place when it comes to boxing. I defer to you. Unfortunately, you don't listen enough when it comes to basketball, but there's hope for you. There's hope.
How dare you? You know I always got you, brother.
Yes, no better source than this man to our left. We ready to get into it because we have so much to discuss on this Friday. We good? Let's do it.
Let's roll. I'm ready.
We tip things off at the Oracle. You know what that's about. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. The verbal sparring between the Thunder and the Warriors got off to a hot start last night as the Durant versus Westbrook matchup was a lopsided affair with a unanimous decision win for Durant and the Warriors. Here's the guys after the game on the chatter that went on.
As long as we're in between the lines, everything all good with me. So I'm going to go out there and be who I am. You talk to me, I'll talk back. I don't really say much, but if you start, I'll finish it.
The Warriors are doing a lot of trash talking. Apparently, I guess they talk a lot of trash now. But, we'll see how that goes. But, we get ready for the next game, man. It's one game, one loss for us. We move on. Get ready for the next one.
I love me some good trash talk. Stephen A., what was your reaction to it, though, last night?
Disgust, because when Kevin Durant gets going, this is exactly what I feared. This kind of annihilation, this kind of game of horse where you're playing around with people and just toying with them. Now, I will confess this. Oklahoma City brought it on itself. When Jeremy Grant dunked in Kevin Durant's face and screamed, even I was like, who the hell do you think you are? Do you not know who this boy is? Kevin Durant is one of the top 3 players on the planet. This dude is a superstar. He's 6'11", who can shoot like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry and J.J. Redick and cats like that. He's got a handle. He can score from anywhere. He can average 30 in his sleep. And from that moment forward, you saw what happened because I looked at Grant. How dare you disrespect you? I mean, if Russell Westbrook said something that's different, of course. Jeremy Grant, what the hell was he thinking? I could not believe how idiotic he was because he got off a good dunk, which is 2 points, by the way. It was lights out from there. He yelled in Durant's face, and I give Steve Kerr credit from this point. Steve Kerr all of a sudden started calling Durant's number. And then the players followed. Steph Curry was getting him the ball. Klay Thompson was getting him the ball. Draymond Green was getting him the ball. And Kevin Durant was abusing Grant. He was too big for Oladipo. He was too gifted, too quick, too skilled for everybody else that they put on him. He put on an absolute show. The game was over in the second quarter. And that's when I got depressed. Because at any moment, this is what the Golden State Warriors will do to 99% of the league. That's my depression. This is what I was lamenting, Max, when I talked about him going to Golden State. I don't have a problem with Kevin Durant leaving OKC. Totally his business. But to go to that team with those shooters, I just said to myself, this is unfair. And last night, that's what it was. Now, OKC did bring it on itself, so I didn't feel as bad for them as to say if I would have felt about somebody else that they did that to, because there were dudes on Oklahoma City's bench, including Enes Kanter. I mean, he was talking, for crying out loud. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, to me, there's only two people on the Oklahoma City Thunder that have a license to open their mouths. That's Russell Westbrook, and that's Steven Adams. Everyone else on that squad should shut the hell up, be happy they're in uniform for the team, and do their jobs. And don't tug on the cape of an elite player like Kevin Durant. I give him credit because he didn't back down. Not only that, he stepped up, he waxed them, he bust their living butt. And they deserved it for the chirping that they were given. But at the same time, it still depressed me to some degree, Max, because it fell in line with what I said to you months ago, and I have never relented one bit. This is the problem with the regular season. It's just an annihilation in the making. Anytime OKC seems to want to do it, I got to pray that San Antonio is going to be interesting and that the Clippers are going to be interesting, because I just don't see anyone else that's going to be able to even be in the same stratosphere as OKC in the Western Conference. It depressed me to watch it, but not as much as it would have had OKC not opened their mouth. They opened their mouth, so they brought it on themselves. But still, the competition, it was just one-sided. Max, they were no match for Kevin Durant. He just destroyed them.
Were you depressed watching the Showtime Lakers?
No.
Right. Were you depressed watching the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman Bulls?
No.
Right. Were you depressed watching the Kobe, Shaq Lakers?
No.
Right. See, everyone's very suddenly, or at least you are, depressed about this super team, primarily because you view it as a character flaw, a weakness in one of its stars. But once you get past that, we don't have to relitigate that whole thing right now. Once you get past that and just look at the team, why not just forget about how they got there and enjoy what you see? Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the greatest point guard and center maybe ever, certainly in Magic's case, and Kareem's case, I think also, ever on the same team, balling, and then you add James Worthy and a cast of characters, all-star caliber, Byron Scott, guys like that. No lamenting how great they were. You just enjoyed it. But with this team, you're so preoccupied with the process of how they came together, you can't enjoy what you're seeing. And what did you see? You saw KD, you brought it up, Jeremy Grant screamed in his face. KD was like, okay, you'll get dealt with. Cantor, talking from the bench, KD addressed that at the postgame. He said, how many minutes he played? 3 minutes? Come on. He addressed that at the postgame. KD, you said you noticed the team. Steve Kerr started calling KD's number when all that went down. His teammates started feeding him. And one of the questions about KD, in terms of the whole character stuff, is does he just want to go to a team and fit in? Like, is it really possible to not be the man? There will come a crunch time eventually. What is he willing to do? Well, they just showed you. He got emotional. The coach noticed it. The team noticed it. Feed him the ball. Feed him the ball. And how did he respond? He killed it. So you just have to get past the way it went down. The fact that one player makes one decision to make himself happy after having no say in where he was drafted, even as one of the best in the world, having to stay there for 7 years, which he did, and balled. The fact that he then makes a choice that makes him happy, just get past that and enjoy what you're seeing. It's a machine, Stephen A. Smith. Don't you appreciate amazing basketball?
Well, let me explain something to you. It's a couple of things, and I'll get to your last point in just a minute. First of all, to address your earlier points, you brought up a couple of things that you had no business bringing up. Yes, the Lakers were formidable with Showtime. Magic Johnson was drafted. So was Larry Bird. It would have been nice ultimately later on if Len Bias hadn't passed away unceremoniously, I might add. But Larry Bird was drafted. When we talk about Michael Jordan, we talk about a guy that was with the same organization who drafted him that came up and built up. In the meantime, the roadblocks were initially the Detroit Pistons, the Boston Celtics, etc. And, of course, Showtime. When Showtime was dominating the Western Conference because of Magic and the collection of talent they had with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and others, there was a level of physicality that was associated with the game where you knew that they could be beat up. And as a result, you wondered to some degree whether or not that would derail them. Ralph Sampson, Akeem Olajuwon, the Twin Towers
Moses Malone
had derailed them. Had derailed them 1 year, Moses Malone, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm saying to you is that because of the way the game was, you still had to be, even though they were favorites, you knew that they could potentially be knocked off. I'll give you an example.
How about the Bulls?
When Michael Jordan, I'm going to the Bulls. When the Bulls had won the title, if you recall, Pat Riley's initial year there, Anthony Mason and the Charles Oakleys with the Ewings, the Xavier McDaniels and those guys, they took those dudes to 7 games because the physicality of the sport and the way that it was allowed you not to have to meet them eye to eye talent-wise because there were rules that facilitated you compromising their talent. In today's game, you could get a technical foul for having bad breath, for crying out loud. So as a result, you can't really touch these dudes.
So I get it. Your perception is that by today's rules, a super team like Golden State is so lopsided in terms of talent, no one else has a chance. And that way, somehow it makes it different. But your first point was they were drafted. And that's my point. When a good GM puts a team in place, there's no complaints. I guess because everyone's staying in their lane. But when someone does something that people perceive as not staying in their lane, like God forbid a player should take his destiny into his own hands and say, I'd like to be on a super team, even if a GM can't construct it for me, suddenly you can't enjoy the product? You can enjoy the product only if the GM puts it together?
That's the part that I'm trying to go to for you. Something happened to me last night. That's what I'm trying to tell you. If that Kevin Durant shows up in the postseason and Golden State is winning the chip, I got nothing to say. That's not a dude riding somebody's coattails. That's a superstar letting you know he's a superstar. That dude that showed up last night literally quelled to some degree my disgust, even though I'm still disgusted. You know, because I want to see competition. I don't want to see an annihilation. I must confess to you, watching that KD last night, please understand, Max, that's not something we've seen from KD often. I'm not talking about the points, because he always done that. I'm talking about mouthing off, guys challenging him, shutting them down, reminding the world he's top 3 in the world. That's a different ballgame.
I understand what you're saying. I know what you're saying in terms of the feeling he's giving you that he'll take over. But really what you're doing is insisting that your personal preference for hero ball in this case is more important than team ball that will actually win. In other words, if Golden State Warriors just win and he's just a cog in the machine, that somehow gives him less credit for you than if his teammates are like, let's feed him and he'll play hero ball. Why?
I have a question.
He doesn't want to. He wants to fit in.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are you entitled to feel a certain way?
Sure.
As a pundit, as a commentator, do you feel that you have the right to feel something when you're watching an Odell Beckham Jr., a Betances with the New York Yankees, because you're a Giants and a Yankees fan, whatever the case may be.
Now, yeah.
Are you entitled, Max Kellerman, to actually feel something from the crevices of your soul?
Sure.
Are you?
Yes.
Then what the hell are you bothering me for what I feel?
I'm pointing out.
I want competitive basketball. I don't want an annihilation every night for 82 games.
You want competitive basketball in two senses. In one sense, you want close games, right?
I want stars colliding. I don't want stars aligning. I want stars colliding.
Okay.
I want to see who's the man.
But that's what I want. You want it, but in Kevin Durant's case, you want it to boil down to a hero ball competition between him and LeBron James. And truth be told, do I. I'd love to see them go back and forth in the finals and it come down to Durant and LeBron. But maybe Durant's preference, which has been my point all the time, is I don't want, that's a world I'm not trying to live in.
Well,
Maybe
wait a minute, but I'm not asking you about
Let me
Durant's
go with this
presence.
team.
See, that's a stop.
Let me go with this team.
I'm not asking you about Durant's presence. I'm asking about yours. I'm asking you about yours. Your preference, man.
Right?
Don't give me what Kevin Durant's preference is. You ain't him. Let him speak for him. What the hell do you want to see?
My preference is for
do
Kevin.
Do you want to see stars collide, or do you want to see them aligning with one another and blowing everybody out?
Sure,
what do you want?
Sure, but I don't want to tell a star the kind of star he needs to be. If Kevin Durant wants to be the kind of star that would fit in well in San Antonio, he just happens to be playing in Golden State, that's his business. And if he can win that way, great.
Okay.
Now, ultimately, will I give him as much credit as I give LeBron? No. But that's the path he chose. I'm never going to say he's better than LeBron because he did it that way.
So Choir Boy Kellerman just doesn't want to have a problem with anything. He wants to get along with everybody.
Problems with plenty of things.
LeBron could be a free agent next year. LeBron could be a free agent. Hold on. LeBron could be a free agent next year, in a couple of years. What if LeBron just sat up there and there was room, and LeBron just said, you know what? I want to go to Golden State with Steph, Clay, and KD.
Did that already,
you gonna like that too?
He kind of did that too. He kind of did that already.
He did not kind of do that. He did not.
Chris
Bosh don't belong in this conversation.
Best players in the world.
Please.
He kind of did already.
Enough.
Chris Bosh don't belong in this conversation, and I like Chris. But come on now.
All right.
He don't belong in this conversation.
We got to go to break. I see stars colliding every morning right here. It's
Please.
so lovely. And we're going to get into the subtle troll job by Westbrook. Official photographers that were in the house will explain, react to that a little later in the show.
You're slick, and I appreciate that.
You can't support that with the evidence.
I thought I was done with stuff like this. I can't believe what I just heard.
Let's get back to being serious for a second.
You're just deaf when you want to be deaf.
Well, as usual, you're wrong, Stephen A. Smith.
You will make an argument 1 minute based on what you read, other times based on the eyeball test.
I don't want to hear broken clock is right twice a day. Today! Damn it! The clock is right.
The American people will not be disappointed. I can't wait for this because sometimes I feel like I work with two politicians, and I mean that with love. Next Tuesday is Election Day, so First Take getting in the spirit. Tune in as Max and Stephen A. go head-to-head on the major issues in the sports world, and you'll be able to judge the debate. So please don't miss First Take's election special next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, a quarterback controversy in Dallas could be brewing as Tony Romo inches closer to being able to play, and Dez Bryant is impressed with what he's seeing from Romo. Quote, he was good. His passes looked like a little missile. He's looking damn good. I'm pretty sure he's just trying to ease himself in, get his mind right, all that stuff. He's been working. I'll give him that. He lost some weight. I thought I saw a couple of abs on him. Gotta love that comment. They say you can't serve two quarterbacks, we'll say, for this situation. And we know Dez wants the ball. Will Kane now with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Always good to see you. You look very nice.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank
you.
I like
starting out with a compliment.
Yes, but I want to...
Finally got the jacket and the shirt right.
Don't you? Let me tell you something. I was listening.
I don't just button this part right here.
Just focus on me.
What, are you going to the club?
Just focus on me.
Okay.
Going to the club.
Let me just say
I'm going to actually
that was hot. The way this show started,
Yeah.
that was hot. And if there's any risk of me appearing like I'm sort of here to get under Stephen A's skin, Stephen A. won that debate, Max. I mean, he slaughtered you.
Absurd.
I mean, do you want to see stars collide, or do you want to see stars align? That's a good line, Stephen A. That's a really good line, Max.
This does not bode well for your argument, but go ahead.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Your powers of analysis.
When I need I appreciate it, but when I need your approval, I will let you know.
I knew, you know what, that was such a predictable retort coming from you. I knew it was going to happen. You can't accept a compliment even when it's deserved.
Right.
I think everything you say is predictable, but it's okay.
Okay, enough of this
I still respect the hell out of you. Go ahead.
Stephen A., I want to start with you. You just heard Dez basically saying that Romo's throwing missiles. Do you think he should be saying this when Dak is currently a starting quarterback?
I do not. I don't agree with that at all, simply because of the way Dak is flowing right now. I understand why Dez is saying it, because obviously the best years of his career have been with Tony Romo throwing him the ball. That's predictable. We understand that. But at the same time, Tony Romo hasn't played all year long. Dak has led this team to 6 consecutive victories. Obviously, it's a dicey situation for all involved to be in, for Dak Prescott to be in, for Tony Romo to be in, watching this young stud on the come up when he's 36 years old and has had about 3 or 4 back injuries over the last several years. It's a dicey situation for Jerry Jones because that's his adopted son. It's a dicey situation for Stephen Jones because he knows that Daddy Jones loves the adopted son that is Romo. it's not a comfortable situation for everybody to be in, and you opening your mouth, highlighting how Tony Romo is looking, may galvanize those Romo supporters and create somewhat of an uncomfortable environment for a young rookie in Dak Prescott, who's done nothing to deserve anything but the greatest level of support that you could possibly muster, simply because of the way that he has performed this year. So again, it's not a crime. It's not something that Des Bryant should be excoriated for, but it is something that has you scratching your head and saying to yourself, I understand why you did it, because Tony Romo's your man, and you obviously look good when Tony Romo is on the field for you because he's proven that to you. But right now, the way things are flowing, why would you put this young kid, Dak Prescott, in that kind of situation, understanding how those words coming from you could be interpreted or misinterpreted? It wasn't cruel, but I just think it was unnecessary.
No. This comment, first of all, is about as benign as it gets. Des Bryant said what he said because he was asked what he was asked. If you're asked, hey, how's Tony Romo throwing it, what are you going to say? No comment? Or worse, like, oh, I don't know, he looks still a little injured to me. He answered the question that was asked, and he said, oh, he's showing a few abs and he's slinging missiles. It's about as benign as it can possibly get. And by the way, Dak Prescott isn't so fragile as to get his feelings hurt about whether or not Tony Romo is throwing missiles. This entire team isn't as fragile as Stephen A. Smith would have you believe that they are. Watch these videos. You can see them online. There's loops of Tony Romo giving Dak Prescott advice on whether or not blitzes will come again from the Eagles or not. He's supporting Dak all the way through. There's some articles put out by Mike Fisher on Scout talking about this team has unique strength and chemistry, buying each other dinners, rookie dinners that the entire team shows up to, rookie dinners that the entire team splits a $55,000 bill for, getting together voluntarily on their bye week to hang out. This team has something special going on. It's not fragile. It's not capable of being disrupted by a random comment. That being said, Tony Romo should replace Dak Prescott. He is the better quarterback. The numbers bear it out.
Let's get to that in a second. Let's get that in a second. Let's get that because I think that's
one at a time.
Yeah, let's take it one at a time. First of all, I agree with Will here. That's a good problem to have. They have two good quarterbacks, so that's not a problem even at all. The only issue is, remember, this is a team that needed a backup quarterback last year. It sunk their season. I actually thought that they were a Super Bowl contender going into last season. Then they lost their quarterback. They had no one who could even tread water. Now they got a backup. The question is the identity of the backup. That's really what it is, what we're dealing with here. And the history of the NFL tells you, as long as the guy who's in there is winning, it's going to be his job until he starts losing. That's just the way it works. It worked that way for everyone. Kurt Warner, I always bring up, even when he was a reigning MVP, everyone, or an MVP in the recent past, everyone. If you look at what Dez said when asked, do you think Romo should start? Me and him, we good, but I don't know. It's a team game. In other words, why did Dez say what he said? But other than the fact that he was asked a direct question, because he needs to know to let his guy know. It's a personal relationship thing. His guy, Tony Romo, you're my man. I got you. I'm going to let everyone know how great I think you are. That's very different than going out and calling for your guy or doing something in the press that starts an argument about who should be starting. When push came to shove and he was asked, he laid back, said it's a team game. That's code word for if we're winning, everyone knows how this goes. It's going to be Dak.
You know, I think you have to stop thinking about this Dallas Cowboys quarterback situation as though it's the New England Patriots revisited, as though it's Bledsoe and Brady revisited. It's possible we're looking at an unprecedented situation where a team has two quarterbacks that they can win with. And I would predict that come December, after the Dallas Cowboys have secured the NFC East, after their playoff path is clear, at the point at which you need to prepare for better defenses, the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs perhaps, better defenses like the Seattle Seahawks, they're going to need a quarterback to step in like a closer in baseball and be able to throw for 400 yards, and that will be Tony Romo. It's possible you see two quarterbacks for the Cowboys this year play very, very well, and at some point, Tony Romo will be on the field. And he will be the better quarterback for that situation.
Well, you know when he'd be on the field? You know when he would be on the field? I looked at this carefully. Given that they're 6-1 now, I said, well, what are you going to do if they're 6-1? Well, he buys himself some time. How much time? They're at the Browns. Let's call that a win. Mm-hmm. So you ain't replacing Dak, who, by the way, is
could be
third.
A trap game.
It could be, but he's third in the league in points added. Third in the league in points added. Like it's not just in a mirage. He's a really good player. If they beat the Browns, whether or not it's a trap game, they'll be favored. Then they go to the Steelers. Then they get the Ravens at home. They'd have to lose 2 of those games. And Dak would have to play substandard in order for Romo to see the field at earliest Week 12 at home against Washington. That's the earliest, and only if they lose a couple of those games.
I think it goes the other way as well, Max. If they win enough, you see Tony Romo.
Oh.
I think both of y'all are getting a bit too scientific with this. That's predictable. Here's the deal. 3 previous seasons before last year, Des Bryant had over 1,000 receiving yards. Tony Romo was his quarterback, and obviously that 12-4 season when the catch that wasn't a catch that should have been a catch in Green Bay is something everyone still laments in Cowboy Nation. The flip side is that Des Bryant got hurt early last year. He missed, 7 games, but essentially it was damn near the entire season because he was never healthy, and on top of it all, Tony Romo wasn't there. That's why he only had 401 receiving yards. And then this year, he's only played 4 games this year, and he's at 263. So you have to look at the agenda per se. He's a wide receiver. To some degree, he can be divish, for lack of a better word. You know, he wants the ball. He wants an opportunity to shine. And when you look at a guy like Tony Romo who would facilitate that, we can understand where Des Bryant is coming from. The problem with it is that in the best interest of the team? And I'm only saying that, Will, to literally throw that question at you. In all seriousness, regardless of what you think about Romo, the way things are flowing right now, and there's something to be said for chemistry and cohesion and how things are flowing in the moment. Whether you say something or whatever the case may be, no matter how benign it may appear, as a reporter for over 20 years, I can assure you there have been situations that appeared so benign just because of a quote. And then we would find out later on that it wasn't absorbed that way. And when you're dealing with divas, you can never summarily dismiss something as benign. I'm here to tell you that right now, Will, because there's usually more to it than that. And that's why I think that you should take Dez's comments. Again, he wasn't being malicious or he didn't have malintent. But the bottom line is, was it wise for him to say something like that in this particular moment? You've got to at least ask that question because of the position he plays and the agenda that probably came attached to those words.
But you're making that analysis respectfully through 20 years of reporting and knowing some divas and seeing previous quarterback controversy situations. And what I'm telling you is this isn't the situations you've seen in the past. There's no evidence that Dak Prescott is a diva that gets his feelings hurt if Dez Bryant...
I'm talking about Dez. I'm talking about Dez.
Well, but Dez, are we worried about Dez's feelings here? The question is whether or not Dez's comments disrupt the 2 quarterbacks playing for the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm telling you, it's not going to disrupt it. There's no evidence that these 2, Tony Romo and Dak Prescott, are in some kind of at their throats, one guy has to lose for the other guy to win type of competition.
Will. There's one job. I mean, it comes down to it. There's one quarterback job. They both are competitive guys. They can help each other all they want. But in the end, it does come down to that. They're going to have to make a decision. Who's the starter, who's the backup?
Max and Will, you got to consider this too. Yesterday, Max, was it yesterday or the day before we were talking about Terrell Owens? Okay? Yesterday. We were talking about Terrell Owens in this situation. Not exactly, but Terrell Owens had issues with Tony Romo and ultimately Jason Witten because he felt... Terrell Owens had issues with Romo and then Jason Witten because he ultimately felt like he was the odd man out. And they were prioritizing taking care of one another instead of looking out for him and making sure he got the ball and he was a game changer, so he wanted certain things. What I'm saying to you is when you're talking anything that involves a wide receiver, Will, is a delicate situation that you can never just look at and summarily dismiss. Because if you're out on the field, Dak Prescott may not be fragile and he may not be phased by that, but who's to say that Des Bryant won't go back out on the field and when he's not getting the ball enough, he can't potentially become problematic because he's not satisfied with what Dak is doing when it comes to him.
I think that's an interesting argument because I think it undercuts one of the arguments that many people make for keeping Dak in the game. The idea that Dak has the locker room. Well, if Dez is asking for Tony, if Dez wants Tony, and it's reasonable to assume Dez would perform better with Tony, that would kind of undercut the idea that the locker room is all for Dak. This debate boils down to this. On one hand, you got people like yourself arguing for chemistry and flowing, whatever that is. On the other hand, you got analysts saying Dak Prescott is leaving a lot on the field. Touchdown passes, 20-yard passes. And my rebuttal to you, and the reason why I'm in this camp, that Tony Romo would perform better with the Cowboys than Dak is because I don't believe a guy that's been in that locker room for 10 years, that's been playing with Jason Witten and Dez Bryant and all these guys for all these years, disrupts chemistry. I don't think he's lost that locker room. I think that locker room would be just happy with Tony Romo as well.
If it ain't broke,
I'll
don't
leave it
fix
at
it's the
that,
history
but
of the league.
I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that, but I will tell you, the brothers understand what flowing is, Will. I won't hold that against you.
I do too. It's a word you use so that you're never held accountable for actual facts.
All right, let's move on here. We have another player who isn't afraid to say what's on his mind, and Richard Sherman, who sounded off on the No Fun League.
The league isn't fun anymore. Every other league, you see the players have a good time. It's a game. This isn't politics. This isn't justice. This is entertainment. And they're no longer allowing the players to entertain. They're no longer allowing the players to show any kind of personality, any kind of uniqueness, any individuality, because they want to control the product. They want to control the messaging, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, Sherman saying the NFL ratings are down because the league is not fun anymore. Stephen A., should the NFL have a problem with those comments?
They should have a problem with it, but at themselves, not Richard Sherman. It should make them very uncomfortable because Richard Sherman articulated and elocuted thoughts of a lot of players in the league, and Commissioner Roger Goodell would be wise to consider those words. Let me go here and let me elevate my level of seriousness when I say what I'm about to say, Will and Max. African-American players in particular have an issue with the level of control Roger Goodell exercises. That's not to say white players don't have that issue. The Drew Breeses of the world and, Eric Winston, who works in the Players Association, and others. Of course, it's not just confined to black players. But I'm talking specifically as it pertains to the issue of control. The socks you wear, the shoes you wear, the celebrations, how you're penalized, how arbitrary the rulings are on the part of officials in terms of when some guys get penalized and other guys don't. It's not that you're not doing it to other people. Don't get me wrong. But those black players that are on the football field, anytime you have rules and regulations that seem to be a bit excessive, it speaks to the issue of control. And African-American players are going to have a problem with that. We grew up watching the NFL. Billy White Shoes Johnson preceded primetime Deion Sanders. And there were plenty of players in between who celebrated and what have you. It contributed to elevating the popularity of the sport. But somehow, some way along the line, folks who didn't play the game, who are wearing their suits, who are making in excess of 20 or 30 million a year, none of whom are black, by the way, are sitting back and saying, when you dance in the end zone a little bit too much, or you dunk over the goalpost, or do something like that, or if in the case of D'Angelo Williams, you want to wear your, pink on your hair to honor your late mom, or Antonio Brown, gyrating or doing whatever it was that he's doing. They're looking at it and they got a real problem with it because the NFL seems so hell-bent on restricting expression. And when that happens, you're going to have players that are going to have a significant problem with that because they're thinking about the fact that they're putting their bodies and their health on the line to elevate the popularity of the sport. They're thinking about the hard salary cap. They're thinking about how the NFL meticulously chooses who to market to promote its sport and who not to. They're thinking about all of these things. And then on top of it all, when they're starving for recognition and they want themselves promoted, and you've got these things restricting all of that, you got a lot of players, particularly of African-American descent, who are incredibly uncomfortable with that, and they actually have, at least to some degree, a case. It is something Roger Goodell should listen to, the league should pay attention to.
Look, it's not lost on me that this is a league of almost all white owners, they're referred to as the owners, and largely black African-American labor. And the white owners insist on a code of behavior, at least on the field, that hews closely to a kind of puritanical ethic. Now, the Puritans founded this country. That's in a lot of the kind of DNA of America. And there are a lot of great things about the Puritans. You know, I mentioned the work ethic and modesty and all those things. But that can cross the line and become prudishness. And it also, when those sensibilities, when that culture crowds out or doesn't leave room for cultures from the margins that are trying to gain access, not just gain access, but influence and have had an influence on the mainstream, you know, you get pushback. I think a lot of that goes on in baseball with celebrations, but that's not a predominantly African-American league. The NBA is, and I think is a little less puritanical about the way they insist on behavior, at least on the field of play. So from that, I don't think it's like a nefarious thing like the NFL is twirling their mustache saying, aha, we're going to control these black players. But I do understand where if you're a member from a group, African-American, immigrant group or other, that doesn't see that kind of puritanical prudishness as who you are and the way you want to express yourself when you do something good, that kind of culture clash, which has always favored the owner's point of view, is starting to move the other way, and this is like what we're dealing with here. This is what Richard Sherman, I think, is actually referring to.
Yeah, okay. I think we don't have a ton of disagreement on this. First of all, the NFL's motivations. The NFL's not out to get back black players. The NFL's not out to control black players. The unsportsmanlike conduct or the excessive celebration penalties, let's be clear, 90% of wide receivers and running backs and defensive backs are black. So the guys that end up in the end zone the vast majority of the time celebrating are black players. Now, is there, as you've said, Max, and I think you said the exact same thing, Stephen A., some sort of cultural definition of what is excessive and a divide between white owners and white Roger Goodell and white referees and black players? Probably. Yes, there's probably some different definitions of excessive, and that needs to be thought out. Secondarily, though, is the NFL the no-fun league because of this? The answer to that, and Richard Sherman, is no, largely no. That's low down the list. I agree with Richard Sherman that the NFL has become, it's become so heavy and burdened, and it feels so serious, and it's because of many reasons. I don't endorse all these. I'm analyzing it. It's because of the infusion of politics. Yes, it has something to do with the protest. It has to do with political issues of any stripe divisively making their way into what is an escape entertainment. It has to do with the saturation of the product. Too many games, too many low quality of games. And I think, and this ties into now Richard Sherman and you, Stephen A., over-legislating. Just too many penalties altogether. The refs appear to be too much a part of the game, from the big to the little, from holding and pass interference to celebration. These are the problems the NFL has, but Richard Sherman's excuse or explanation is low down the list.
Well, let me respond to what you said. First of all, before I retort, I want to say that I appreciate your response. I take no offense to what you said about the owners and what their agendas are not, or whatever the case may be. I disagree with you, but you have a right to your opinion. I take no offense. I found nothing offensive about it remotely. But it's important that you understand something that you said. You said the owners are not out to get black players and stuff like that. I certainly wasn't implying that. What I'm saying is, by virtue of what Max articulated, the fact that in 2016, where you have plenty of black folks out there with money, that good old boys club that owns NFL teams, there is not a black owner amongst them at all. And so even though that may not, quote unquote, be their intent to restrict, to hold back from an expression perspective or anything else, the actions of African American players, the fact that you have no representation, no diverse representation amongst the ownership, and these players who are being curtailed, who are being stymied in terms of their expressions, primarily happen to be black. Yeah, the rules apply to everybody, but from a cultural standpoint, they know what they're doing, because a lot of those white players act the way that the owners act, because there's a cultural identification that they share with one another, whereas black players do not. They're different. They're different people. They come from different cultural backgrounds. Right. They think differently. They feel differently. They express themselves differently, but they're beholden to rules and regulations from individuals that have no relation to them whatsoever, but profit off of them. Well, and that is where you have a problem.
Well, I don't think we disagree. I don't know where we disagree. Actually, when the NFL instituted excessive celebration penalties in 1984, that, like pass interference, is inherently subjective. It's always, what is the line? What is too far? And yes, I agree with you. Once you ask that kind of subjective question, you're going to get cultural divides. You're going to get people who have disagreements on what excessive is. And I agree, that's a problem. The NFL's not going to fix this, by the way, of creating more rules. Like, you can't go over 7 seconds. You can't get in 5 players at the same time. You can't do X, Y, Z. More rules aren't going to solve this.
The NFL's Byzantine rules, it's not as accessible as basketball, for example, which is why basketball is the fastest growing sport globally. It's just easier to understand, more accessible than the NFL. There are too many rules. All that's true. But I think the reason that these issues come up in the NFL, you say burdened, Will, by social issues, is because it's this monolith. It is achieved recently, and maybe that's being challenged by the NBA. We'll see what happens with baseball after this Cubs World Series and the infusion of home runs in the game again. But it becomes this place where we play out, because of its near monopolistic position in the kind of psyche of the sports fan, where we play out social dramas and we litigate publicly social issues, because it is the most powerful entity in entertainment in this country, period. That's the reason I think those issues get attached to the NFL. I think any sport in the NFL's position, by the way, this happens to ESPN or any very powerful and dominant institution. These kind of issues will come to them because that's what occupies the minds of the fans.
I'm not doubting that's true, Max, and I'm not actually saying whether it's right or wrong, but I'm telling you the NFL is paying the price for it. People treat this as entertainment and escape, and if it ceases to be I
don't know what it can do about that.
Well, but the dancing is entertainment, too.
That's true.
I got a last comment to add.
Yep.
I got a last comment to add. Mm-hmm. The NFL in America is king. But if you speak to a lot of people in terms of a global iconic brand, a legitimate argument could be made that the NBA has done a better job than baseball, than the NFL, than everything but soccer. And obviously the NBA is incredibly popular. Well, guess what? It also happens to be more diverse, not just in terms of the body of players, but their willingness to market those players. It's not an accident that Max Kellerman pointed out the other day, the average age of baseball's audience is 53. The average age of the NFL's audience is 47. The average age of the NBA's audience is 37. And obviously that younger demographic is what all the sports league covets. So the NBA is incredibly successful. And maybe, just maybe, the fact that they have an owner in Michael Jordan who is black, who is a majority owner, who is not the first, the second, because Bob Johnson was the first, and he was with the Charlotte Bobcats before Michael Jordan took over and changed their name to the Hornets. The bottom line is you got 2 African Americans that were the first to be majority owners for major sports in this nation, and they both are affiliated with the National Basketball Association, not the National Football League, not Major League Baseball, and it is a sport that unapologetically markets individual players who happen to be black. Maybe the NFL needs to back up and take some examples from the NBA and listen to Richard Sherman along the way and chill the hell out.
One final point. My rebuttal to that would be this. The NBA better adopt the philosophy, but for the grace of God, go I. Because if you think the NBA is void of these issues, domestic violence or political disagreements, you are kidding yourself.
No, we're talking about police in the league.
Labor has been greatly empowered.
The reason you don't hear about it as much, Max, is because everybody comes at the king. Everybody makes their
that was my point.
On the king.
That was my point.
And the king is the NFL.
That was my point. But to Stephen A's point, labor has been empowered by the former commissioner and especially by the current commissioner, I think, to affect change in ways maybe they don't feel empowered in.
I got you. I'm with you on the celebrations, though. I'm with you on that.
That was a great conversation. You'll be back with us later. Another important conversation we need to have regarding Annie and Eli Apple.
Hey, football fans, this is Mel Kiper Jr. On the latest First Draft podcast, Todd McShay and I identify a crisis which must be dealt with in the world of football. Find out what it is when you subscribe to the show in the Listen tab of the ESPN app.
Our next ESPN NBA doubleheader is today. As Derrick Rose back in Chicago leading the Knicks against the Bulls, then it's the Warriors taking on the Lakers. Our coverage tips with the NBA Countdown, charged by Dew at 7, also streaming live on the ESPN app, and watch ESPN so you can check it out on the go. Sports Center at night with Nicole and the coach. They'll have all the NBA and NFL news for you this weekend and so much more. Sports Center at night on ESPN, also streaming live on the ESPN app and Watch ESPN. And then you know what it is. It's a call to action, folks. The First Take Your Take viewer contest is here. Win a chance to debate Stephen A. and Max right here on national television. All you got to do is go to firsttakeyourtake.com, upload a 1-minute video with your best original sports debate. Keep it clean, plus no music, team logos, trademarks, or copyrighted material. 2 winners will be selected by our staff, and we could see you at the debate desk taking on Stephen A. and Max. Here's a few of our latest submissions.
Why is it every week we go through the same thing with the Cowboys? I want to leave Dak's mindset right where it is. In the mindset that, hey, when Tony Romo is healthy, I may or may not be the starter. So what that tells Dak Prescott's mind to do? Stay hungry.
No, he should not start over Dak. You want to know why? Because Dak, he does so much better than Tony Romo on third downs. Let's see, this year he's at 46% on third downs, 4th in the NFL.
It's called Jerry Jones. Has this guy ever made a logical football decision? Tony Romo will be back. His name might as well be Tony Jones, but he will be back.
I like it. I saw a lot of flavor there. What do you think? The 2 toughest critics.
Well, I didn't. The guy that shoved his paperwork or his books off the table, that's a bit dramatic. He engaged in hyperbole. It came across as phony. He was trying too hard. He's disqualified.
Oh, I liked
the last
it.
brother, I didn't like it at all. He has no chance. He better show up with another video. That ain't working.
I know you don't want to say hyperbole of all people, but it came off as fake, right? Is that what you're saying?
I liked it. It was passion.
Well, listen, you can call it whatever you want. I'm as real as it gets. But
yeah,
let
you're
me tell
real,
you
but hyperbolic, yes.
Well, I can be hyperbolic when I'm annoyed. That's all.
In that case,
you call it hyperbolic.
Well,
anything compared to you is hyperbolic because you're a choir boy. You understand that? That's why I would appear hyperbolic, Max Kellerman. All right? That's just the way it goes.
You're aware that choir boy doesn't mean always right. That's a different. You must think choir boy means always right. Let me tell you about those videos. I agree with Stephen A. Smith on this one.
I think choir boy means wanting to be loved. That's what I think it means.
I
want to be loved.
Worried about that.
I'm not worried about it. I'd expect a little more. Again, I agree with Stephen A. If you're gonna have a prop that you want to use, then you got to find that place in you that really wants to use that prop. Don't just use it because you brought it. It was okay.
All
okay
right.
is not good enough. Good enough is not good enough.
All right, that's the call to action. They're being challenged.
Yeah.
Let's get into our next subject here. If the playoffs started today, the Giants would find themselves in the playoffs, but unfortunately for them, the season doesn't end today. And on Sunday, they're hosting an Eagles team that Eli Manning has beaten once in the last 9 home games, including the playoffs. Both teams are 4-3, 2 games behind Dallas in the NFC East. Stephen A., who needs this one more?
I think the Eagles do. And the reason why I say the Eagles do is because I think regardless of what happened with the Giants, their offense is potent enough where they can overcome it. As long as Odell Beckham Jr. is healthy, Victor Cruz is healthy, Sterling Shepard is healthy, and Eli Manning gets his act together, they have an opportunity to make noise the second half of the season, the last 8 games in an NFC East. That's how I feel. In the case of the Philadelphia Eagles, I consider their offense to be devoid of the requisite weapons where they could make some kind of noise. Darren Sproles was formidable, no doubt. Jordan Matthews can play. But I don't know what happened to Ertz and Zellick at the tight end spot this year. Aguilar, you would like to see him develop better. Huff is now off the team because of, the gun possession, even though a lot of people are crucifying him for that. He had the gun licensed, according to the reports, if I remember correctly, in a couple of other states, but not necessarily in New Jersey, so he may have just dropped the ball. Either way you slice it, it was ill-advised on his part. They just seem to have some issues now, and it's becoming more flagrant. And as a result, I think that the Eagles, this is a big week for them because they seem to be falling apart by the seams, and they need something to pick them up quick, fast, and in a hurry. With the Giants, I just think it's a health issue and a cohesion issue. They get that together, even with the loss. I think they can overcome it and make noise in the second half of the season. I don't view the Philadelphia Eagles that way.
First, as a Giants fan, I can tell you that of all the divisional rivals, and the NFC East has these great divisional rivalries, and they always seem to be these tough, hard-fought games, even when one team's really good one year and another team's not so good. But of all the teams I hate to see my Giants play, the Eagles are at the top of the list. They have been the thorn in the Giants' side, not just in the last million games that you just mentioned, home for the Giants where the Eagles continually win. But if you ever see, going back to when I was a kid, if the Giants won the Super Bowl, rest assured the Eagles would beat them at least once, probably both games the very following season, and keep them out of the playoffs. They're just, you see they're playing the Cowboys, you see they're playing Washington, you're like, all right, no problem. You see you're playing the Eagles, it's like, damn it, those guys are the thorn in the Giants' mighty side. And this year, in fact, the Eagles are also better than the Giants so far. The Eagles, it will surprise some to know, are first in point differential in the NFC. They are second in the NFL to the Patriots. Second in the league in point differential, meaning fundamentally so far. They're a really good team, and that's backed up by the fact that their 3 losses, because the Giants and the Eagles are both 4-3. The Eagles' 3 losses, 1 point on the road to the Lions. 1 score on the road to Washington in a game they should have won. They blew it at the end, red zone interception. An overtime loss on the road to the Cowboys that Doug Peterson handed to the Cowboys on a silver platter. Those are the 3 losses. The Giants, on the other hand, also 4-3, still have a negative point differential. Fundamentally, they're really barely a 500 team or a little under 500. A little lucky to be over 500 right now. But the Giants, for the reasons you pointed out, Stephen A. Smith, have a chance to make a playoff run if they can get certain components of the team together. Because as we all know, other than the Patriots, most teams aren't the same in the beginning as they are in the end. They're different teams throughout the season. Very few teams are great at all points in the season. So if the Giants can get their O-line together, and the O-line is something that can come along with chemistry, they have talent on the offensive line. Eric Flowers, a high first-round draft pick, is a talented guy, but very raw, and he's beaten consistently, getting a little better as the season goes on. Chemistry among the offensive line, between offensive linemen, can improve over the course of the season, something the Seahawks often bank on. If that happens, and the Giants 9-7, 10-6 can squeak in, they can make a run. We've seen it happen twice in recent years. They went on to win the Super Bowl. So they need all of these games now. If there's a winnable game and they're 2.5-point favorites at home, meaning on a neutral field, they'd be the underdogs. In Philadelphia, they'd be almost touchdown underdogs. But at home, they're 2.5-point favorites. You got to steal these games where you can, so your record is good enough where if that line comes together, you can make a legitimate run. Must have these games. Divisional game at home, must have it.
Well, nobody said that they didn't need the game. What we're saying is who needs it more, them or the Eagles. And I'm saying the Eagles can ill afford it because they don't have the requisite weapons that the New York Giants have at their disposal. I'm making the argument that the Giants can overcome it quicker than the Eagles would because they're equipped to do so. I don't believe that to be the case with the Philadelphia Eagles. Their passing attack is ranked 29th in the NFL. Their running game is ranked 16th in the NFL. Ryan Matthews isn't doing much for you. Jordan Matthews can't do it alone. Okay, neither can Sproles. Carson Wentz is still a rookie. Lane Johnson is not your offensive line. It's not the Dallas Cowboys offensive line, and the defense can only do but so much. They played admirably against the Dallas Cowboys, but in the end, they don't have the requisite weapons to overcome being in the abyss or any kind of an abyss the way the Giants can. The Giants could lose and turn around in the second half and wreak havoc because their offense has the potential to be that explosive. That is not the case with the Philadelphia Eagles. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you know something about the Eagles, though? When you look at it, you say they don't have the weapons, and on paper it looks that way. Think about this for a second. Best point differential in the NFC, second best in the NFL to the Patriots. And the 3 losses I pointed out, by 1 point on the road to the Lions, by a score on the road to Washington, a red zone interception late in the game. Overtime, we saw Doug Peterson hand them that game. And having said all that, like, they could easily be 7-0 instead of 4-3 right now, as the point differential indicates they should have a better record. Think about this for a second. That's with all those drops. Their receivers dropped the ball a lot. And with all of those
don't get me started with
drops,
Green Beckham. He hasn't caught a pass yet, as far as I'm concerned. I'm speaking facetiously because obviously he has. But Green Beckham drops passes. We all know this. Let's also take into account that the Eagles opened the season with 3 victories. The win against Pittsburgh was obviously legitimate. They annihilated them. But the first 2 games against Cleveland, against Chicago, there's nothing that we should write home about that with that. And then with the Minnesota Vikings, Minnesota comes into the game. There is no Adrian Peterson. Stephon Diggs isn't healthy. Sam Bradford is back in the mix, and the offensive line with 2 missing tackles were pretty much decimated, so they didn't protect Sam Bradford at all.
You could take credit away from Cleveland and Chicago, sure, but the wins against the Steelers, who were flying high at the time, and Minnesota, those are
not
really
Minnesota for me.
Those are really good wins. Those are Stephen A. And that's with all that point differential stuff I went over, all those clauses. That's factoring in those drops. A few receivers hold on to the ball. It's a problem.
Pittsburgh, yes. Minnesota, no.
Big Blue, baby, let's go. Can't wait. It's going to be a good one. Our run of huge Big Ten games continues Saturday night on ABC with number 10 Nebraska taking on number 6 Ohio State, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on ABC, also streaming live on the ESPN app and watch ESPN. And don't miss this, our First Take Veterans Day special honoring the true heroes next Monday from Joint Base Charleston in South Carolina. We're going to have special guests tune in next Monday as First Take hits the road for our Veteran Day special. Meanwhile, Annie Apple, the mother of Giants first-round pick Eli Apple, who is also an ESPN and Sports Illustrated contributor, has been writing recently about her personal experiences with domestic violence, being livid with the Giants and her disgust with co-owner John Mara and her belief that the team was leaning heavily on her son in an effort to control his mother. Now, in the wake of her openness, Eli was asked 7 minutes of questions on Thursday exclusively about his mother, her columns, and their relationship rather than anything about this week's matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. Eli saying this: "It's definitely a weird position, of course. You just want to focus on football and have football be your main focus. And sometimes when things like this come up, it definitely makes it a little bit hard because you're thinking about it just a little bit. But I've just got to move on from it, talk to her a little bit, speak my mind and move forward. It's like, that's my mom, so I can't really try to come at her at all. She's going to check me big time." Well, Kane, now back with us, but good to have you. But I want to start with Max here on this subject. Oh, okay. We'll start with Will, actually. We'll go back to the original plan. Always trust your gut, right? Will, should Annie Apple back off?
Yes. Yes, she should. This is always a fun conversation to have because here we go down the path. I get to be accused of supporting domestic violence or telling a domestic violence survivor she shouldn't be speaking. Not the path. This is the situation. Annie Apple has to analyze her place in the situation, okay? If you reduce that into know your place, woman, you're not listening and you're not trying to be smart on this. Annie Apple is a supporting character in the Eli Apple story. She's very much like Aisha Curry in that respect, or P.J. Willett, Danny Willett's brother, or there was a swimmer this summer in the Summer Olympics named Katika Hosu from Hungary, and her husband had the spotlight on him a lot. When you're a supporting player, you have to understand that if you diminish or undercut or take away from the main player, Steph Curry or Eli Apple, you risk not only their career, but the reason people are listening to you in the first place. People want to hear what Annie Apple has to say because Eli Apple is an NFL football player. That's why. And if she does think...
She was a media personality prior to Eli getting drafted, just so you know.
She has a Sports Illustrated column. The reason we're talking about
this today... But she was already working in media. I just want you to be clear on that.
That's fine.
It amplified her platform. Her son's position amplified her platform.
So, by the way, what we're talking about here is she has an inherent conflict of interest, and the conflict is her son's career. So she is doing something ultimately that can diminish her own voice. It doesn't mean I don't think her perspective is important. It doesn't mean I don't think her perspective is something we should hear from. But she should understand and she should personally be able to analyze what she's doing here and potentially how it affects her son. But secondarily, you bring this up, Molly, she had a professional career as a pundit or an analyst before this. Well, she has a responsibility as well. And in this latest column, I think Annie Apple is irresponsible in several ways. Let me just give you a few of those. Number one, I am extremely sympathetic to Annie Apple's past and what she's been through. She has definitely unique perspective on domestic violence. but that does not give Annie Apple special insight or knowledge on why the Giants did what they did. She accused them of acceptance and passivity when it comes to domestic violence. Does she know something we don't know about why John Mara decided to give Josh Brown a one-game suspension? I don't know. I don't know all the analysis that went into it, and I can't leap to the conclusion he doesn't care about domestic violence. That's number one. Number two, she said in her column, he didn't call her. The Giants didn't call her after her column. Well, they don't have a responsibility to call her. She's not the center of this story. She's actually not even a part of this story, and that leads us to number three. She has said the Giants, and she's livid about this, are leaning on Eli to tell her to stop. Eli himself has said that is false. That is not true. Annie Apple has a responsibility to treat this subject with the accuracy that it requires. I want to hear from Annie Apple. We all want to hear from Annie Apple. But she needs to go through this calculus. And when you step into this realm, I expect to be criticized. She should expect to be criticized. And these are very, very fair criticisms.
I want to address that. In the first place, the Giants try to, I'm not saying they always succeed, but they try to draft character. They try to draft character guys, unless there's an obvious talent gap. Where it's close, there was drafts where every single guy they draft was a team captain. Like, that stuff is important to them. And the thing about character guys is oftentimes they come from character parents. In this case, a character mom. A lot of times they come from character moms. And this character mom feels compelled. Whatever, everyone in the media has an ego. I mean, we all want attention for where we don't just wind up in front of a microphone or a camera or in a column. I mean, that doesn't happen accidentally. Your profession chooses you for a reason. But that aside, I'm willing to accept the idea that she feels compelled by her own moral compass to speak out, even if it's inconvenient for her son or someone else. And I would say that in this case, rightly or wrongly, according to your analysis, but in her analysis, she's holding the Giants to their own standards, their purported standards. And my view about the Giants and why it would have been a good idea to reach out to her is rather than run from that, what the Giants might want to do is run toward that and embrace it. And I think that would go away, considering her perspective that you mentioned on this subject, having survived it. That would go away toward them rehabilitating their image, if not their soul in that sense, and would be a good idea.
Stephen A.?
I wanted to go last because I didn't want to be interrupted with what I'm about to say. Will, you're wrong. And not only that, I think in this particular instance, you're being a bit insensitive, if not flat out disrespectful. Here's why. You brought up the Ayesha Curry comparison. Ayesha Curry is a wonderful woman, but at the same time, she spoke about trying to get into the arena conspiracy. She talked about racist cops in Cleveland or whatever the case may be because of something that happened with a relative of hers. And then she accused the NBA of being fixed. Those are things that had something to do with the game, to the point where, with all due respect to the wonderful woman she has proven herself to be, it put Steph Curry in a position where he had to sit up there and talk about his wife after losing Game 6 of an NBA Finals. Okay? So what I said at the time about Ayesha Curry is something I should have said about Bill Clinton, because whoever's in the spotlight, you got to look out for them because they're the ones in the eye of the storm, not you. In the case of Annie Apple, there's no comparison here. She is on the record saying she is a domestic violence victim. That is a far more serious situation. Number two, she's pointing to John Mara, how he handled the situation, combined with the quotes that he gave, which is why she highlighted in a column talking about he was insensitive, dismissive, and callous, because she pointed to things that he said, his actions, and how we learned in the aftermath of Josh Brown's transgressions, how the Giants were, dare we say, exercising a dereliction of duty in terms of how they conducted themselves in that matter. So if you are Annie Apple and you're commenting about Eli Apple and how he's being used on the field or a coach's decision or something like that, that's far different. To sit up there and to say that a mom shouldn't ingratiate herself into football matters and how her son is being utilized, you would have a point. That's not what she was doing here. She's speaking about an issue that is very relevant and very piercing to thousands, if not millions, of women out there who happen to be victims of domestic violence. This is a woman that has been in news for over 20 years. She used to work at NBC in Philadelphia. She worked at NBC and MSNBC. She was a writer. She was a producer. This is before she got allowed to do some work for ESPN. It was before she was allowed to do some work for SI.com. This is a woman that's on the verge of going to homeless shelters to address and help those women any way they can who have been domestically abused and beyond. She is an active participant in the fight against domestic violence. And an organization who happens to employ her son exercised such a level of insensitivity in terms of how they addressed the Josh Brown situation that they were excoriated not just by me, not just by Max, but pundits and commentators all over the place because there was no question that the New York Giants could have and should have done a better job in doing so. So to sit up there and to bring Annie Apple to the equation and to talk to her about knowing her place and all of this other stuff, what place is there? She's a victim of domestic violence. She's speaking about them as it pertains to domestic violence. She isn't somebody that's talking about Eli Apple on the football field or the Giants on the football field. She's talking about a sensitivity on a part of an organization who was supposed to be first class that exuded anything when it came to Josh Brown.
If I may, I don't want to interrupt you, Stephen A. I wanted to grant
Sure, go ahead.
You deserve it. I don't want to jump in, but we're running out of time. And I have to say this. It's possible that I'm wrong. It won't be the last time. It isn't the first time. I don't think I'm wrong. But I'm not insensitive. And I'm not being disrespectful to Annie Apple. Disagreeing with someone and questioning their criticism and analysis is not being disrespectful. And if we can learn anything in this entire equation, whether it comes to race or domestic violence, it's the guy that nods at you vacantly and tells you you're right on everything is not the guy that is respecting you. On the merits of this, you said Aisha Curry forced Steph Curry to sit up there and answer questions. So did Eli Apple. He had to spend 7 minutes specifically talking about his mom. But you also brought up the seriousness of the issue. I completely and utterly respect Annie Apple and what she's been through, but I also know this, Stephen A., it doesn't make her infallible. It doesn't mean everything she ever says is right.
Well, I agree with that.
And she can't be wrong. And on this situation, Eli himself has said she is saying things that are false. The Giants are not leaning on me. What I'm here today saying is this. Just because you've been through something doesn't mean you can't be questioned and doesn't mean you're right on everything. And Annie Apple, in this situation, has gone too far. She said things that are irresponsible.
We have to go to break, but you talked about her responsibility earlier, and I think it's her responsibility to stand up for domestic violence victims as a survivor herself. She can't just sit by and watch.
Even if it's inconvenient for her son.
Even if it makes her son uncomfortable. No, listen. Even though it makes her son uncomfortable, this is for the greater good, and this has to be done. And it is
for the greater good.
It
is for the greater good. But let's also remember the impetus for it all was how the Giants handled the situation. That was the impetus for her opinions. It's not like she just said something. The Giants exposed themselves for exercising a level of insensitivity.
And we mentioned earlier that this was maybe primarily for media attention. I can tell you, I know these two have suffered tragedy. Anybody that's suffered tragedy in your life, something like this, it is so hard to open up emotionally and to put yourself out there and to relive those kind of events. She's doing this purely for the other victims to be a voice, and as Max mentioned earlier, a moral compass.
Molly, all that can be true, and all of that goes unrebutted from me, but it doesn't absolve you of let me finish. It doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of treating this conversation, a very important one, with the respect the truth requires.
Of course.
And she had said things in this column and inserted herself into the story in ways that do go beyond simply the cause. Causes cannot run over the truth.
Wait, let me just say, what you seem to be arguing is you simply disagree disagree with her analysis of the situation or her conclusion about the situation, not her right to be saying it or the fact that she is saying it. You disagree
definitely
with her
not her right to be saying it. She definitely has a right to be saying it. Whether or not she's saying in the right place at the right time and saying the right things is certainly up for debate.
And that's what
she doesn't have a right to say that Eli Apple is being stymied from being supportive of her or whatever the case may be. She does, but I get you there. But her position on domestic violence as it pertains to the New York Giants, she has every right to say what she said.
Well, no one is
and
questioning
she's qualified
her right
to say it.
No one is questioning
her right.
To say
it.
And by the way, just about Eli Apple, the way he's handled it, when I said character mom, character guy, I think he couldn't be more kind of open about it and handling it any better than he is. He's in an awkward position.
And I just don't want victims to be excoriated from speaking out because of the backlash they'll receive. More First Take after the break. Stay here. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Just ask two official photographers. In case you're confused, let me explain. So we all know Westbrook likes to take fashion risks, right? But this ensemble, it might have a deeper meaning. So KD loves photography, and he was the official Players Tribune photographer at last year's Super Bowl. Then fast forward to pregame last night for their first meeting, and Westbrook went hard with the subtle troll job, an orange smock that reads official photographer.
Madrid, I saw the photographers walking around with the thing on, and I asked the young lady, can she give me one? Because I thought it was a great fashion idea for upcoming collection. So I just thought it'd be a good something I can wear. Something I thought it was pretty cool.
Why'd you decide on it tonight?
Just because I wanted to. There's no particular reason. There's no story behind it. It's just that because I wanted to wear it. I don't wear anything for nobody. I wear what I want to wear when I want to wear it.
All right, Max, what does this outfit say about Westbrook?
He's not being slick. I mean, he's got what is it called, a photographer's bib, because KD, people put two and two together. KD was a photographer for the Super Bowl, is a hobbyist, apparently. So Westbrook, let me just get this straight. Before the game, said it's just another game. I prepare the same for everybody. Westbrook, by the way, I got to preface this. My favorite player to watch. My favorite player. I'm usually Team Westbrook. But he says my favorite player to watch. He says I prepare for every game the same all year. And he's been great all year. 5 games now. Last night, a guy who was averaging 37 and change with 10 and 10, by the way, for an undefeated team, ran into the guy that dumped him. Like, let's not get this bent. Durant did the dumping. Westbrook got dumped. He's salty about it. I mean, he has feelings about it, which is why he's trolling Durant in this way. He goes 20 points on 4 for 15 shooting from the field, Stephen A. He said it was the same old, but his behavior before the game didn't say that, and then during the game didn't say that. It wasn't the same old, and I hate to say it because I'm saying this about my favorite player. I think Westbrook played himself.
Well, it appears that he played himself because they got annihilated last night. They got embarrassed. But had he played the way Durant played, and they had won the way Durant and the Warriors had won, that would not have been the case. Did he play himself a little bit? Okay, fine. But let's understand why. Let's understand that he was provoked. Again, here's where it gets tricky on this particular day. And here's where it gets a bit convoluted. The normal KD that we see, who tries to come across as the good guy, doesn't want to ruffle feathers, he's trying to make people happy, etc. Nah, that doesn't coincide with what his actions have typified, because he's the guy that put Russell Westbrook in a bad spot. Not because he left, but how he left and what he left Westbrook to answer for as it pertained to his decision behind us leaving OKC. But when KD shows up and is willing to put on that black hat and tell him to go kick rocks and I'm going to bust your butt because you ain't on this level, and he goes out there and he shows it, all right, then it does make Westbrook look a little silly because you've done what you've done to bring attention to yourself, and then you went on a court and your team got annihilated. So that's what we're looking at here, and that's what we have to pay attention here. Westbrook, to me, sat up there and said, we'll see them again. There's just one game. They talking junk now, the whole nine. The reality is that the Oklahoma City Thunder don't appear to be good enough to deal with the juggernaut that is the Golden State Warriors. It's a damn shame that it is that way, because the more that it appears that way, the sillier Westbrook is going to look doing things like that.
And
if
what
you're
about
going to do those kind of
question,
things,
Stephen? I want to ask you a basketball question. You say I don't ask you enough basketball questions, but that's not true, and we both know that.
No, I said you don't learn enough. That's what I said. Like I learned from boxing from you. You don't learn enough from me. That's what I said.
Do you buy Westbrook's claim that he wasn't trolling KD, that it wasn't about
not at all.
KD? Right.
Not at all. I said that. Not at all. I don't buy that at all.
We accept he was trolling KD. Then I also find it weak that he wouldn't own up to it. See, there are three. Listen, you told me something about basketball. You put me up on something I learned that blew my mind when you told me that Jordan in his prime would talk smack and antagonize guys off the court. And I assumed as soon as you told that, being a boxing guy, like Ali, he's trying to get a mental edge by getting under your skin, throw you off your game. And you said no. You said this on the air a couple months ago. No. Jordan wanted to motivate you to be the best version of yourself. So basically, when he took your soul, you knew and he knew that he took your best and beat it. That's the highest level of competitiveness I've ever heard. Now, below that, there's the I'm going to talk smack and back it up. Right? Whether to get under the other guy's skin, whatever. I'm going to talk a good game, and I'm going to walk it. And below that is what Russell Westbrook did. He talked a game, essentially, although he denied it, which is kind of weak, and then didn't walk it once he got on the court. As I said, 4 from 15 shooting and a lopsided loss. Even if he played very well and they lost, that had been one thing. And I take no joy in saying that, again, my favorite player. But that's like 3 or 4 levels from optimally what he would be doing, Stephen A.
Bottom line is this. You got to go out there and perform when you do that. If you don't do that, you're going to look bad. If Russell Westbrook had dropped 39 last night and waxed the Warriors, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about him trolling KD in a negative way. We would have said it in a positive way because he would have backed up what he said, and he wouldn't have had to say anything. But I don't blame him for denying it after the game last night because you just got beat down.
KD got the last laugh, but I did appreciate the creativity there with the troll move by Westbrook.
Hey everybody, Scott Burnside, ESPN.com here on the latest edition of Hockey Today, the podcast. We hear from New Jersey Devils captain Andy Green, talking about the Devils' surprising start, and Milan Lucic of the Edmonton Oilers joins us.
Raider Nation, it's going down Sunday. Both the Raiders and Broncos are 6-2, tied for first in the AFC West. It's Derek Carr and Oakland's high-powered offense, which is 6th in scoring, going against Von Miller in the Broncos' 5th-ranked Super Bowl-winning defense. All eyes will be on this one. Max Kell, which team is better right now?
I love this. The answer is the Broncos. And the Raiders have become a little overrated. Their offense, let me make this very clear, their offense is great. Great O-line, great young quarterback, great receiver, excellent receiving core. They're a fun team to watch. I think the fun quotient that you have watching the Raiders, people get mixed up with the actual good quotient. They're more fun than they are good. And they've won a lot of tight games, so that makes them look a little better than they actually are. The Raiders are plus 12 on the year. That's 14th in the NFL. The Broncos are plus 58. That's tied for 3rd overall. Broncos have a great defense, a competent quarterback. Stephen A., you brought it up earlier in the show that, they got a competent quarterback. Or maybe you brought it up in the meeting this morning. They got a competent quarterback, so we all know they're good. Look, their defense has been a little vulnerable in recent weeks where you isolate the linebackers against wideouts. And, yeah, of course, every team has an underbelly. You can always expose something. If you get a linebacker on a wideout, sure, you can exploit that. But the Broncos are the better team. A great matchup, too, by the way, quickly. The O-line for the Raiders have only allowed 9 sacks. The Broncos have 26 sacks on the season. That's where the game will be decided. The Broncos are the better team.
Well, listen, I'm going to say this to you, Max. I honestly don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out this Sunday. And the reason why is because I want to see what the Raiders do. We know their defense is hideous. We get all of that. They're like 28th against the pass, 27th against the run. We understand that about the Oakland Raiders. We get that. But their offense is so high-powered, I can't dismiss these guys. Derek Carr is a stud. He might be the best young quarterback in football. We got to pay attention to this kid moving forward because he's that elite. Amari Cooper and Crabtree have established themselves as stud. Let's keep in mind they've got a two-headed running attack in Latavius Murray and this kid DeAndre Washington, because they both can play. DeAndre Washington is averaging more than 5 yards a carry. Okay, Latavius Murray is at 4 yards a carry. Not only do you have that with Amari Cooper and Crabtree, Max, but you also got this kid Seth Roberts who scored the winning touchdown against Tampa, and you got this other dude, Clive Walford, as your tight end spot. And 70% of the time that Derek Carr throws the football in his direction, he's catching passes. And so when I look at it from that perspective, and I see the holes in the interior, not the secondary with Talib and Chris Harris Jr. and those boys and Roby, I'm talking about that linebacking core in terms of defending slot receivers, in terms of defending tight ends, and helping to neutralize the running game. If we don't see more of that from the Denver Broncos, then who knows what kind of troubles they're going to have. Then the Oakland Raiders are undisciplined, 23 penalties last week. We get that. Their passing defense, their defense against the rush, hideous. We get all of that. But if your offense is so high-powered that you don't get to see that defense that much, and Denver's offense is not high-powered, particularly with the absence of C.J. Anderson, because we're going to find out what Devontae Booker can bring to the table now that he's going to be the focal point out of that backfield, it can get interesting.
The Raiders always have a punch.
What happens Sunday night.
The Raiders always have a puncher's chance. I get the feeling that everyone's a year early on the bandwagon because everyone wants to see what's going to happen. They need another year to fix the defense.
6-2.
The Broncos are Super Bowl champs now. The Raiders need another year to fix that defense, be Super Bowl contenders.
Oakland favored by
Malik Jackson and Danny Trevathan are gone from the Broncos defense.
Just win, baby. More First Take after the break. Stay here. All right. So, Stephen A., you got a big weekend in Vegas. That's what I hear. And you happen to have a man on the show who's called many fights for about 20 years. Do you have any pointers, as Stephen A.'s calling the Vargas Mayweather fight?
Before Max even comments, Max, I want you to know.
Yes.
I'm literally I said before Max says anything, I want Max to know I've literally stayed up last night watching you call fights, trying to learn how to do this. I just want you to know that.
Well, I did the same with Larry Merchant, by the way. And I will tell Stephen A. Smith, I will tell you that you know boxing. You and I chop it up about boxing for years now, going back. Who do you think is going to win, Kelly Pavlik or Edison Miranda? Like, Stephen A. is a hardcore boxing fan. So I have no pointers for you because what I would say is just say what you really think. But do you really need to be told to do that?
I don't need to be told what I think, but I mean, Dan, when I'm listening to you call fights, you not only call what you see, you call what the rest of us haven't seen because you study these fighters. I mean, I know some of these guys, I haven't seen a couple of these guys. I'm nervous, man.
I'm tuning in to hear Stephen A. Smith's call.
Me too. And there's a pre-show.
Well, wish me luck, because damn it, I need it.
You're going to be great.
Need it.
You're a natural at everything you do. It's going to be great. We'll see you guys Monday. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. Catch First Take weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on ESPN2.
Oregon brings an offense averaging over 40 points per game into the Coliseum to face the red-hot USC Trojans. Coverage begins Saturday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio, presented by Dr. Pepper.